Hey guys, tonight, we're going to imagine a world made silent. A world where the last buzz has faded and the final bite has been forgotten. Picture this with me, if you will. It's a warm summer evening and you're sitting on your porch. The air is still thick with the scent of jasmine and cut grass. The streetlights flicker on, painting the scene in a soft orange glow. The crickets are beginning their nightly chorus, a familiar rhythm of clicks and chirps. But something is missing. You don't feel that slight, almost imperceptible vibration in the air, the high-pitched drone that has been the soundtrack to our warm seasons for as long as we've existed. The little shadow that once danced on the edge of your vision, a harbinger of an irritating itch, is gone. You realize you can sit here indefinitely without a single slap to the arm or a wave of the hand. You're completely and utterly at peace. Now here's the funny thing. The reality is, you'd probably only survive this peace for a little while before things got weird. But we'll get to that. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is for you right now. Just let me know in the comments below. For now, let's begin our journey into a world without a hum. The first thing to vanish would be the sound itself, the little sonic signature of a summer night. It's a sound we've come to despise, to associate with annoyance and discomfort. But what if we considered it differently? What if that high-frequency whine wasn't just a nuisance, but an ancient echo, a vibrational testament to the planet's life force? It's a sound that has accompanied human beings through the dawn of agriculture, through the rise and fall of empires, and through the quiet revolutions of our own personal lives. That sound, that tiny infuriating hum, is a part of the Earth's natural symphony, a part of the grand orchestra of life that plays on whether we are listening or not. To remove it would be to remove a note from a piece of music so old we no longer remember when it was written. It would leave a space, a vacuum of silence that our minds would have to learn to cope with. This is not just about the absence of an insect. It's about the absence of a fundamental part of our sonic world, a part of the tapestry of our collective experience. We are so used to the presence of these tiny creatures that we don't even fully perceive their existence until they interact with us, until they seek us out. But they are everywhere. They are a massive silent army, a global population that numbers in the quadrillions. Their disappearance wouldn't be a slow fade. It would be a sudden, jarring cessation. Think of the sheer volume of this collective hum. It's the background noise of entire continents, a subtle pressure on our eardrums. We might not hear it consciously, but our brains are always processing it, always filtering it out. The absence of this filtration process, the sudden lack of this constant low-level sensory input, might be more unsettling than we could ever imagine. Our brains, those intricate and endlessly fascinating theaters of consciousness, are built to perceive patterns. When a pattern is suddenly and irrevocably broken, what happens to the mind? Does it create new patterns to fill the void? Or does it simply feel an emptiness it can't quite name? This brings me to a fascinating concept in neuroscience, one that feels particularly relevant to our little thought experiment. It's called sensory deprivation. While we're not talking about a total lack of sensory input, the removal of a constant and pervasive sound could have some strange effects. Studies on sensory deprivation have shown that the brain, when starved of external stimuli, begins to create its own. People in these studies often experience vivid hallucinations, seeing things that aren't there, hearing sounds that have no source. What if for a few days or weeks after the last mosquito had vanished, we all experienced a kind of phantom buzzing? What if our minds, so accustomed to filtering out the noise, kept hearing it even after it was gone? It's a beautiful and eerie thought, isn't it? The ghosts of a sound we hated so much forever, echoing in the quiet spaces of our imagination. The truth is, we don't really know how our minds would adapt to a world without this specific sonic irritant. We don't have a control group. We are the experiment. And this is just one tiny ripple in a pond that is about to experience a tidal wave. The mosquito's hum isn't just a sound, it's a signal. It's a signal of life of summer, of a world in full bloom. But it's also a signal of something more. It's a signal of danger. The vast majority of mosquito species are harmless to humans, and many are crucial pollinators. But the handful of species that do carry disease have shaped human history more than any king or general. They are the silent, unseen architects of our past. They have determined where we could settle, what crops we could grow, and how our societies would be structured. Think of malaria, a disease carried by the Anopheles mosquito. Malaria has been a constant presence in human history for millennia. It is estimated to have killed more people than all wars and plagues combined. It's a staggering number, a truth that is hard to wrap our minds around. The disease has influenced everything from the genetic makeup of populations. The prevalence of the sickle cell trait in some communities is a direct evolutionary response to malaria, to the strategic decisions of militaries. Armies have been decimated, not by enemy swords, but by the bite of a tiny insect. The Roman Empire, for example, is believed by some historians to have been weakened by malaria, which was rampant in the swamps surrounding the city. The mosquito was an equal opportunity killer, felling peasant and emperor alike. This silent force of nature has been a constant pressure on our species, a constant challenge to our survival. Another little-known scientific fact is just how ancient this relationship is. The oldest known mosquito fossil dates back to the Cretaceous period over 100 million years ago, a time when dinosaurs still roamed the Earth. These tiny creatures have been a part of the planetary tapestry for an unimaginable length of time, an enduring thread in the grand design of life. They predate us by tens of millions of years. This gives our hypothetical extinction a different weight, doesn't it? We aren't just removing a species. We are erasing a chapter from the planet's history book, a chapter that began long before our own. The mosquito's story is the planet's story, a story of evolution, adaptation, and survival. To simply rip out that page is to deny the complexity and the resilience of life itself. So when we imagine a world without them, we are not just imagining a world without an annoying hum and an itchy bite. We are imagining a world without a constant, brutal selective pressure that has shaped our biology and our history. We are imagining a world without a tiny creature that has in its own way defined what it means to be human for millennia. The initial silence, the first few moments of peace, would be a fragile veil. What lies behind it, what truths are revealed by its absence, is the real mystery we are here to explore. We've only just begun to feel the edges of this quiet new world. The hum is gone. But what will rush in to fill the void? We will begin our journey by looking at the seemingly obvious benefits, the immediate quiet that would descend upon the world. The absence of mosquito-borne diseases like malaria, dengue fever, and Zika would be a triumph of human health, a victory so profound it would reshape the global map of suffering. But remember, the world is a system of interconnected parts, a vast and complex machine. You can't simply pull out a cog without expecting the rest of the machine to shudder, to slow down, to perhaps even grind to a halt in some unexpected places. We are about to look at the first tremors, the initial shudders of a world that is just beginning to realize a major player has been removed from the stage. We are so quick to celebrate this imagined victory, this cleansing of the world of a species we have come to see as a pure evil, a biological mistake. But is anything in nature ever truly a mistake? This is the first question we must ask ourselves as we step into this new world, a world made quieter and we assume safer. The initial undeniable impact would be a global sigh of relief. The World Health Organization would no longer publish terrifying statistics on malaria deaths. Dengue fever, a scourge in tropical and subtropical regions, would begin its slow, irreversible retreat. Zika, a recent and frightening threat, would become nothing more than a historical footnote. The collective human energy that went into battling these diseases, the billions of dollars spent on research, the tireless work of aid organizations, the sheer mental and emotional toll on communities would be freed. It's a beautiful vision, a world where the tiny tyrant of the night no longer holds sway over our lives. But let's pause for a moment and consider the sheer scale of this disappearance. We're not talking about a single species, but an entire family of insects, the Culicidae, which includes thousands of different species. Only a small fraction of these species bite humans, and an even smaller fraction transmit disease. The vast majority live their lives without ever interacting with us, feeding on nectar and plant juices. They are a part of a larger system, a machine far more complex than we give it credit for. When we say kill all mosquitoes, we are invoking a kind of global ecological genocide. We are pulling a thread from the very fabric of life, a thread so ancient and so interwoven with other threads that we cannot possibly predict all the consequences. Let's consider the concept of food webs, a fundamental idea in ecology. We often visualize a food chain as a simple, linear progression. A plant is eaten by a herbivore, which is eaten by a carnivore. But reality is far more intricate. A food web is a complex, tangled net of interconnected relationships. Every species, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, is a knot in that net. Mosquito larvae, for instance, are a crucial food source for a variety of aquatic life. Fish frogs, newts, and other insects feast on them. When we eliminate the mosquitoes, we are not just getting rid of an annoyance. We are removing a foundational food source from countless ecosystems. What happens to the fish population in a wetland, for example, when a major part of their diet suddenly vanishes? They might find other things to eat, but maybe not. Maybe they will decline in numbers, which in turn affects the birds and mammals that prey on them. The ripple effect is not a matter of a few hungry frogs. It's a potential collapse of entire local food webs. This brings us to a peculiar scientific observation, a paradox of sorts. In places where mosquitoes are abundant, they often attract a huge number of predators creatures that have evolved specifically to hunt them. The Arctic, for example, is home to vast swarms of mosquitoes in the summer months. These swarms are a critical food source for migratory birds, which fly thousands of miles to gorge on the protein-rich insects. The mosquitoes are a temporary but essential larder. The sheer number of mosquitoes is what makes them such a vital resource. A small flock of birds might consume millions of mosquitoes in a day. What happens to these birds when they arrive in the Arctic to find the larder empty? Do they find another food source, or do they simply starve? The survival of entire species of migratory birds could be at stake. The truth is, we don't fully comprehend the extent of these dependencies. We are not just talking about the obvious predators like birds and bats. We are also talking about the tiny unseen players, spiders, dragonflies, and other insects. The loss of a vast food source could create a domino effect of extinctions, a silent unraveling of the delicate relationships that hold the natural world together. It is a mystery we haven't solved yet. How much of the world's biomass, its collective living matter, is tied up in mosquitoes? The answer is a lot. The sheer weight of all the mosquitoes in the world is a staggering number, and that weight, that mass, is a huge part of the planet's energy transfer system. It's the energy of the plants they feed on transferred to the animals that eat them, and so on. To remove them is to disrupt this fundamental flow of energy. There's a subtle and beautiful idea in ecology, the concept of a keystone species. A keystone species is one that has a disproportionately large effect on its environment relative to its abundance. Think of a wolf pack. They are not the most numerous animals in the forest, but their presence can control the population of deer, which in turn prevents overgrazing and allows the forest to thrive. A world without wolves is a very different world. Mosquitoes, while not a classic keystone species, could be considered a kind of biomass species, a foundational link that, because of its sheer numbers, plays an enormous role in supporting other life, Their absence would be felt not as a missing piece, but as a hole that suddenly opens up in the middle of a complex weaving of void that the other threads cannot easily bridge. This brings me to a question that has always fascinated me, a question that lies at the heart of our very human desire to control our environment. We are so focused on the immediate tangible effects of things, the sickness, the itching, the inconvenience. But what if the greatest harm is the one we never see coming? The slow, silent decay that begins in the corners of the world we never pay attention to. The swamp, for instance, is a place we often think of as a bad place, a place of stagnation and disease. But a swamp is a vibrant ecosystem, a filter for our water, a nursery for countless forms of life. The mosquitoes are a part of that ecosystem. They are a sign that the swamp is alive. If we remove them, we might clean up the swamp in one sense, but we might also be killing it in another. The historical reality is that we have always been at war with the natural world, a war of conquest and control. We have drained swamps, deforested land, and paved over wilderness in our quest for safety and comfort. But what if this desire to control to fix nature is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of our place in the world? What if we are not the masters of the earth, but simply one part of a grand interconnected whole? This is the central philosophical question of our thought experiment. When we imagine killing all the mosquitoes, we are imagining an act of ultimate control, a final, decisive move. But what if the greatest wisdom lies not in control, but in understanding and in learning to live with the parts of the world that we find difficult, that we find annoying, that we find perhaps even dangerous? It is a question that physicists still wonder about in other contexts. The principle of quantum entanglement, for instance, where two particles can be connected in such a way that the state of one instantly affects the state of the other, no matter the distance between them. The universe, it seems, is far more interconnected than we ever thought. And so is our Earth. We are just beginning to see how a small change in one place, like the disappearance of a tiny insect, might instantly and profoundly affect another place, a place we never expected. The hum is gone, and the silence is beginning to reveal its secrets. The silence, at first so welcome, begins to feel unnatural. It's like the sudden quiet after a car engine stalls, a kind of stillness that is not peaceful, but ominous. This quiet isn't a passive absence. It's an active vacuum, a space demanding to be filled. And this is where our thought experiment gets truly interesting, because nature, as a rule, abhors a vacuum. An ecological niche, the role and position a species has in its environment, is a valuable and often contested piece of real estate. The sudden disappearance of a creature as numerous and widespread as the mosquito would leave behind a massive number of vacant niches, a kind of biological ghost town. We have to understand the mosquito, not just as a bloodsucker, but as a diverse and complex group of organisms with many different roles. There are the adult mosquitoes, which, as we've discussed, are food for birds and bats. But there are also the mosquito larvae, which live in water. These larvae are tiny wriggling packets of protein, and they are a vital food source for countless aquatic animals. They are also filter feeders, helping to clean the water by consuming algae and microorganisms. The adult mosquitoes, the ones that don't bite us, are also pollinators, sipping nectar from flowers and helping plants reproduce. To remove all of them is to leave a hole that has to be filled. The question is, by whom? This leads us to a core principle of ecology: competitive exclusion. The idea is that two species that compete for the exact same resources cannot coexist indefinitely. One will eventually outcompete the other. When we remove one species, we create an opportunity for another to expand its range, to move in, and take over the now vacant niche. Who then would be the heir to the mosquito throne? We might imagine other insects, perhaps midges or flies, increasing in number to fill the void. These insects might not be as good at their job as the mosquitoes were. They might not be as efficient a food source or as effective a pollinator. The new dominant species might also bring their own problems, their own challenges to the ecosystem. Maybe they carry different diseases, or maybe they are a nuisance in a different but equally frustrating way. There is a strange and beautiful truth about life on Earth. It is incredibly resilient. It finds a way. But the way it finds is not always the way we would want. When an invasive species is introduced to a new environment, for example, it can throw the entire system out of balance. It can outcompete native species and cause them to go extinct. We are in our imaginary scenario, creating the ultimate invasive species problem, a sudden global opportunity for any opportunistic creature to take over. And the consequences could be wild and unpredictable. Consider the frog. A frog's diet is heavily dependent on insects, and many frog species, especially in the larval stages, rely on the abundance of mosquito larvae for food. The frog is a wonderful example of a creature that exists in a kind of liminal space between water and land, a bridge between two worlds. The mosquito, in its life cycle, also occupies both worlds. The larva is aquatic. The adult is terrestrial. They are a link, a connection between two vital ecosystems. Without the mosquito, that link is broken. What happens to the frog population? Perhaps they find other insects to eat, but perhaps not. Perhaps their numbers decline, and then the creatures that eat the frogs, snakes, raccoons, certain birds also decline. The web begins to tear. This raises an interesting and deeply philosophical question. Is it even possible for us to fully understand all the connections? The brain, that marvelous complex machine, operates on a principle of neural networks, a web of interconnected neurons that communicate with each other. We are only just beginning to understand the intricate pathways of our own minds, the way a thought in one part of the brain can ripple out and affect a feeling in another. The natural world is like a brain, a massive interconnected neural network of life. Every species is a neuron, every relationship, a synapse. When we intentionally sever 1 billion of those connections, as we would by killing all mosquitoes, we are essentially performing a massive unplanned lobotomy on the planet. We might remove the part of the brain that causes a great deal of pain and suffering, but we have no way of knowing what other crucial functions we are also destroying. The truth is, we don't really know for sure what a world without mosquitoes would look like. It's an exercise in humility, a reminder that our knowledge of the world is so small, so limited. We tend to focus on the obvious, the things we can see and feel. The mosquito bite is a tangible thing, an immediate source of irritation. But the invisible connections, the subtle dependencies, the unwritten rules of the ecosystem, these are the things we often overlook. This is where the magic and the danger lies. Think of the strange scientific principle of Novikov's self-consistency principle, a hypothesis in physics that suggests that if time travel were possible, it would be impossible to create a paradox. Any attempt to change the past would be thwarted by events that would conspire to keep the past consistent. While we aren't talking about time travel here, the concept of a self-consistent system has an ecological echo. The natural world has a kind of self-consistency. It has spent millions of years finding a balance, a state of equilibrium. When we introduce a massive disruptive change, the system will try to find a new balance. But that new balance might be a shadow of the old one. It might be a world with less biodiversity, a world with fewer species, a world that is less rich and vibrant than the one we had. The disappearance of mosquitoes is a kind of biological time machine, a jump to a new reality. We hope this new reality is a better one, a safer one. But what if the past, the mosquito-filled past we know was consistent for a reason? What if the mosquito, in its role as a carrier of disease, was also a kind of strange, cruel architect of human society? What if its presence forced us to be more ingenious, to develop better technologies, to organize ourselves in ways that made us stronger? This is not to say that disease is a good thing, but it is to say that every pressure, every challenge shapes us. To remove that pressure is to change the shape of our future in ways we can't possibly foresee. The silent world we now inhabit is a world of possibility, but also a world of profound risk. The humming is gone, but the reverberations of its absence are only just beginning. We are like children who have turned off the lights in a dark room. We are safe, we think. But we don't know what new shapes will emerge from the shadows, what new sounds will replace the old. The silence is not an ending. It is a beginning. It is the first breath of a new and deeply uncertain chapter. The quiet has settled over the world, but it is not a uniform quiet. It's a mosaic of different silences, each with its own character, each telling a different story. In the vast marshy lands of the Everglades, where the water is still and the air is thick, the absence of the mosquito's hum feels like a missing heartbeat. The soundscape of this crucial ecosystem has been fundamentally altered. The familiar high-pitched whine that once filled the air is gone, and with it, a subtle but vital rhythm has been lost. To understand this, we must think of the world, not just in terms of what we see, but what we hear. The symphony of nature is made up of countless tiny sounds, a chorus of chirps, croaks, buzzes, and rustles. Each one has a purpose, a role to play in the grand performance. The mosquito's hum was a percussive beat, a constant low-level thrum that provided a backdrop for all the other sounds. Without it, the other instruments of the orchestra sound different, their melodies now starkly exposed in the stillness. The calls of the frogs, for example, which once blended with the background noise of the insects, now echo in a new and perhaps more vulnerable way. But this isn't just about the aesthetics of sound. It's about the deep biological connections that sound represents. The mosquito's hum is more than just a sound. It's a signal. It's a signal to predators that food is available. It's a signal to other insects that the season is right for breeding. It's a signal of life itself. The absence of this signal could have a profound effect on the behavior of other creatures. Remember how we talked about food webs and the role of mosquito larvae. Now let's think about the adults. Many bats, for instance, are insectivores that rely on echolocation to find their prey. The mosquito is a perfect bite-sized meal. What happens to the bat population when a massive percentage of their food source simply disappears? They will, of course, adapt. But adaptation is not instantaneous. It takes time. And in the interim, the population of these crucial night hunters could decline. This leads us to a beautiful and humbling concept in biology called niche partitioning. It's the idea that different species evolve to use different parts of a resource or to hunt at different times to avoid direct competition. Think of a group of different bird species all living in the same forest. One might eat seeds from the ground, another might eat insects from the bark of trees, and a third might catch flying insects in midair. Each has its own niche, its own unique way of making a living. The mosquito, in its sheer abundance, provided a niche for countless species. The dragonflies, for example, are voracious predators of adult mosquitoes. They are a kind of aerial police force keeping the mosquito population in check. Without mosquitoes, the dragonfly population would almost certainly decline. And what would happen then? Would other smaller insects, once kept in check by the dragonflies, now flourish unchecked? The swamp, that ancient and mysterious place, is the perfect example of this delicate balance. It is not a wasteland. It is a world unto itself. The still water is teeming with life, a microcosm of the planet's intricate relationships. The mosquito larvae, those tiny wriggling creatures, are a fundamental part of the water's health. They are a food source for fish and amphibians, and they help to filter the water. Their disappearance is not a simple removal. It is an act of surgery on the ecosystem. The water itself might change. Without the larvae, the algae might grow unchecked, creating blooms that could choke out other forms of life. The very chemical composition of the water could shift. It is a slow, quiet change, a kind of unmaking that happens beneath the surface far from our prying eyes. This is a key part of our journey, understanding that the most profound changes are often the ones we don't immediately perceive. We are looking for a spectacular collapse, a sudden dramatic event. But nature is more subtle than that. The collapse would likely be a slow erosion, a gradual decline that only becomes apparent after years or even decades. It's a bit like the concept of entropy in physics, the idea that systems tend to move from a state of order to a state of disorder. The ecosystem, in a way, is a system of organized life, a fragile, intricate balance. The removal of a major piece like the mosquito increases the disorder. The system will try to find a new equilibrium, a new kind of order, but it will likely be a less vibrant, less complex one. We tend to think of our planet as a solid static thing, but it's not. It is a living, breathing entity, a massive, interconnected organism. We are all a part of its biology. We are all cells in its body. The mosquito is a tiny, often irritating cell, but it is a cell nonetheless. To simply remove it is to deny its place in the greater whole, to assume that we can understand the entire complex system from our limited human perspective. The truth is, we don't really know what the full interconnected role of the mosquito is. There are still so many unanswered questions. Physicists still wonder about the true nature of dark matter, that invisible substance that makes up the majority of the universe. In a similar way, ecologists are only just beginning to understand the dark matter of our ecosystems, the countless tiny species and connections that operate in the background, shaping the world in ways we can't see. The silent swamp is now a world without a crucial link, a world that is slowly, imperceptibly changing. The song of the frogs, once a harmony with the hum of the insects, is now a solo. The water once filtered by a million tiny mouths is now left to fend for itself. The predators once assured of a bountiful feast are now having to work harder to search farther to find a meal. The new silence is not a sign of peace. It is a sign of a wound, a tear in the fabric of a world we never fully understood. The silence has now taken on a new texture, a new weight. It's no longer just an absence of sound. It's an absence of a presence. We feel it most acutely in those places where life once thrummed with a low-level insectoid energy. The air which once seemed to be alive with a million tiny buzzing wings now feels thin, empty. This isn't a peaceful stillness. It's an unsettling quiet, the kind you might find in an abandoned building, where you know life once flourished, but has now retreated, leaving behind a profound emptiness. This emptiness is a real thing, a kind of ecological ghost. The niche that the mosquito occupied the role of a widespread, abundant, and vital species is now vacant. And nature, in its infinite wisdom and relentless drive to fill every available space, will not leave this niche empty for long. We can imagine a kind of cosmic job, fair, a global competition to see which species is best suited to take over the role of the mosquito. Who will win this competition? The answer is far from clear. The candidates for the throne are many, and each one brings its own set of strengths and weaknesses. We might see an increase in the number of midges, those tiny non-biting flies that are often mistaken for mosquitoes. Midges, like mosquitoes, also breed in water and are a food source for fish and birds. They are a logical candidate to fill the ecological void. But they might not be as good at the job. They might not be as numerous, or they might be less nutritious for predators. The ripple effect of this one change could be enormous. The population of fish that once fed on mosquito larvae might now be struggling to find enough midges to eat. This decline in fish could in turn affect the birds that eat the fish. The tapestry of life, once woven with a million fine threads, is now unraveling, and we are left with a series of gaping holes. Another candidate is the humble dragonfly. Dragonflies are voracious predators of mosquitoes. Their diet is so heavily skewed toward these insects that they could be considered a kind of biological police force, keeping the mosquito population in check. Without mosquitoes, the dragonfly population would almost certainly decline. But what if another species, perhaps a species of smaller flies that the dragonflies also prey on, now flourishes unchecked? The disappearance of one predator could lead to the overpopulation of another species, a new and perhaps even more annoying pest. We might have gotten rid of the mosquito, only to be plagued by a cloud of tiny biting flies that we never had to deal with before. It's a classic case of an unintended consequence, a lesson in the delicate balance of the natural world. This brings me to a fascinating concept in ecology, the idea of a trophic cascade. A trophic cascade is a phenomenon in which predators at the top of the food chain indirectly affect species at the bottom. The classic example is the reintroduction of wolves to Yellowstone National Park. The wolves, by preying on the elk, reduced the elk population. This allowed the vegetation to grow back, which in turn brought back birds and beavers, and even changed the course of the rivers. The absence of the mosquito, a foundational species in many food webs, could trigger a reverse cascade, a kind of downward spiral. The disappearance of a food source at the bottom of the food chain could lead to a decline in predators at the top, a silent, unseen collapse that happens in slow motion. The truth is, we don't really know how resilient these ecosystems are. We assume they will find a new balance, a new equilibrium. But what if that new equilibrium is a world with less biodiversity, a world that is less rich and less vibrant than the one we had? We often think of our world as a theater, and we as human beings are the main actors. But the mosquito is a part of the stage crew, a kind of unseen stagehand that helps everything run smoothly. We are now performing our play on a stage that has been fundamentally altered, a stage where the props and backdrops are slowly being taken away one by one. This raises a deep philosophical question about our relationship with nature. We have always sought to control it, to tame it, to make it serve our purposes. But what if the greatest wisdom lies not in control, but in understanding our place in the grand, chaotic, and beautiful dance of life? The brain, in a way, is a kind of ecosystem, a vast network of neurons, each with its own specific role, its own niche. When we suffer a stroke, for example, a part of the brain is damaged, and the neurons in that area die. But the rest of the brain, in an amazing display of resilience and neuroplasticity, begins to rewire itself. It finds new pathways, new connections, and it learns to compensate for the loss. But the new brain is never quite the same as the old one. It is a new landscape, a new way of being. Our planet without the mosquito is undergoing a similar process. It is a new landscape, a new way of being, and we are living in it, day by day, watching it unfold. The ghost in the machine is the mosquito, the tiny, irritating, and utterly essential piece of the puzzle that we have removed. Its absence is a kind of negative space, a void that other species are now rushing to fill. The new world is a world of opportunity, but it is also a world of profound uncertainty. The humming is gone, but the reverberations of its absence are only just beginning to be felt. The stage is set for a new drama, a new play in the theater of life, and we are all in the audience watching with bated breath, wondering what will happen next. The new world is still. The silence is not just an auditory phenomenon, it's a physical one. We feel it in the quieted hum of the night, a stillness that changes the very way we experience the outdoors. The nights are no longer a frantic buzzing affair, but a placid and peaceful scene. The soundscape has shifted, and with it, the rhythms of life are changing. The quiet is a kind of sensory shift, a recalibration of our senses to a world that no longer contains the constant, low-level irritation of the mosquito. But what about the rest of the world? How are the other creatures, the ones who once lived and died in a world full of buzzing life, adapting? Let's turn our attention to the symphony of the swamp, that ancient and mysterious place we talked about earlier. The frog, that humble and ubiquitous inhabitant of wetlands, is a creature whose life is inextricably linked to the mosquito. Many species of frogs rely on the hum of insects to time their own breeding cycles. The male frogs in their nightly chorus are not just singing for a mate, they are also responding to the sounds of their environment. The collective hum of the mosquito was a kind of cue, a signal that the conditions were right, that the swamp was alive and ready for the next generation of life. Without this cue, what happens? Do the frogs' choruses become less synchronized? Do they miss their chance to breed? It's a question we don't have an answer to, a piece of the puzzle that has now been lost forever. The changed soundscape isn't just about the absence of a hum. It's about the new dominant sounds that now fill the void. The calls of the frogs, once a harmony with the insects, are now a solo performance. The rustle of the leaves, the splash of the water, the chirps of the crickets. All of these sounds are now more prominent, more noticeable. It's a bit like turning down the volume on the background music of a movie. The dialogue, the sound effects, and the other details suddenly become clearer. But is the movie better? Not necessarily. The background music was a part of the experience, a part of the feeling and the mood. Without it, the movie feels different. It feels colder, more stark. This brings me to a fascinating and little-known scientific fact. Some species of mosquitoes are attracted to the sounds of their prey. The female mosquito, for example, is attracted to the sound of a certain frequency, a low-level hum that emanates from our bodies. She is in a way listening for us. We are the orchestra, and she is the conductor. We are the signal, and she is the receiver. When we remove her from the equation, we are not just silencing her. We are silencing a part of ourselves, a part of our own sonic signature. This leads us to a beautiful and strange concept in physics, the idea of wave-particle duality. It's the idea that light and all matter can behave as both a wave and a particle. A mosquito, in a way, has a kind of ecological wave-particle duality. It is a tiny particle, a single insect with a physical body that is a food source for other creatures. But it is also a wave, a kind of ripple in the ecosystem, a carrier of a signal that affects the behavior of countless other species. When we remove the particle, we also remove the wave. The ripple is gone. The signal is gone. And the world is now a different place, a place that is still trying to figure out how to operate without that signal. The truth is, we don't really know how the long-term changes in the soundscape will affect the natural world. It's an uncharted territory, a biological experiment that has never been performed before. We assume that the other species will adapt, that they will find new ways to communicate, to hunt, to live. But adaptation takes time, and in the interim, there could be a great deal of chaos, a great deal of confusion. This is the great mystery of our thought experiment. We have a desire for order, for a world that makes sense, for a world that is free of annoyance and danger. But the natural world is not orderly. It is a messy, chaotic, and beautiful place, and the mosquito was a part of that mess. Its absence is a kind of artificial order, a kind of stillness that is not natural. This raises a deep philosophical question about our place in the world. We are so used to seeing ourselves as separate from nature, as observers, as controllers. But we are a part of it. We are a part of the orchestra. The mosquito, in its relentless pursuit of us, was a part of our shared story. It was a reminder that we are not alone, that there are other forms of life that are just as determined, just as driven as we are. Its disappearance is a kind of self-imposed isolation, a denial of our place in the grand chaotic dance of life. The new symphony is a strange one. The orchestra has lost one of its most prominent instruments. The music is now different. It is quieter. Yes. But is it better? The answer, I believe, is far from certain. The silence is a kind of echo, a reminder of a presence that is now gone. And in that silence, we are just beginning to hear the faint new notes of a world that is slowly, imperceptibly, learning to sing a new song. We've explored the soundscape, the food webs, and the ghost of the mosquito's niche. Now let's turn to a role of the mosquito that is so surprising, so counterintuitive, that it feels almost like a riddle. We have always seen the mosquito as a destroyer, a disease carrier, a nuisance. But what if it was also a creator, a life giver? What if in its short and annoying life, it was also performing an essential function that we never noticed? I'm talking about pollination. When we think of pollination, we think of bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds. We think of the beautiful, charismatic creatures that flit from flower to flower, carrying the gift of life from one plant to another. The mosquito does not fit into this romantic image. It is not beautiful. It does not flit. It buzzes and bites. But the truth is, many species of mosquitoes, particularly the males, feed on nectar. They are not interested in our blood. They are interested in the sugary sustenance that flowers provide. And in their search for this nectar, they inadvertently become tiny, clumsy couriers of pollen. The most famous example of this is the case of the Arctic orchid, a plant that is entirely dependent on mosquitoes for its reproduction. The orchid has a unique and beautiful flower that is perfectly designed to attract mosquitoes. It has a specific scent and a shape that guides the mosquito directly to the pollen. The mosquito, in its search for nectar, inadvertently gets pollen on its head and body and then carries that pollen to the next orchid it visits. Without the mosquito, the Arctic orchid would simply cease to exist. Its beautiful, fragile existence is inextricably linked to the very creature we so despise. This is a beautiful and humbling truth. It's a reminder that nature is not black and white, good and evil. It is a complex, interconnected web of relationships where the line between predator and pollinator, destroyer and creator, is often blurred. The mosquito is not a one-dimensional villain. It is a multifaceted player in the grand drama of life. Its disappearance is not a simple victory. It is a profound loss, a kind of biological sacrifice that we are only just beginning to understand. This brings me to a core concept in genetics and evolution, the idea of co-evolution. This is the process where two or more species evolve in response to each other. The mosquito and the Arctic orchid are a perfect example of this. The orchid evolved a shape and a scent that would attract the mosquito. The mosquito, in turn, evolved a way to feed on the orchid's nectar. They are locked in a kind of ancient genetic dance, a beautiful and intricate pas de deux that has been going on for millennia. When we remove one of the dancers, the dance stops, the music ends, and the other dancer is left to flounder, to fade into oblivion. We tend to think of evolution as a slow, gradual process, a kind of steady march toward a better, more efficient design. But the truth is, evolution is often a messy, chaotic, and beautiful process of trial and error. It is a series of small, incremental changes, a kind of genetic conversation that takes place over millions of years. The mosquito is a part of that conversation. Its DNA is a library of information, a record of its long and ancient history. When we remove the mosquito, we are not just destroying a creature. We are burning a library. We are erasing a chapter from the planet's genetic history. This raises a deeply philosophical question about our place in this evolutionary dance. We, as human beings, have been given the power to alter the course of evolution. We can, in a single decisive act, end the long genetic conversation between two species. But with great power comes great responsibility. Do we have the right to do this? Do we have the wisdom to understand all the consequences? The truth is, we don't. We are like children playing with a loaded gun, a weapon that could destroy a beautiful and ancient relationship that we never even knew existed. Remember how we talked about entropy, the idea that systems tend to move toward disorder. The long, intricate dance of coevolution is a kind of biological order, a state of profound complexity and balance. The removal of the mosquito, a key player in this dance, increases the disorder. It's a kind of genetic chaos, a kind of ecological fragmentation that could lead to a loss of diversity, a loss of beauty, and a loss of life itself. The quiet world we now inhabit is a world of unintended consequences, a world where the line between hero and villain, creator and destroyer, has been erased. The hum is gone, but the reverberations of its absence are just beginning to be felt. The Arctic orchid, once a symbol of the quiet beauty of the tundra, is now a ghost, a memory of a dance that has been silenced forever. The silence is not a sign of peace. It is a sign of a profound and irreversible loss. And in that silence, we are just beginning to hear the echoes of a world that is less rich, less vibrant, and less beautiful than the one we had. As we move through this newly silent world, we feel the effects not just in the great wetlands and frozen tundras, but also in the quiet corners of our own minds. We are a species that has been shaped by the presence of the mosquito, not just physically, but psychologically. For millennia, the buzzing of a mosquito was a sign of danger, a warning of a potential threat. It was a signal that a tiny unseen killer was near. Our brains, those magnificent and complex theaters of consciousness, have been hardwired to react to that sound, to that feeling, with a sense of unease. Think of the primitive part of our brain, the amygdala, which is responsible for processing fear and threat. The mosquito's hum, that high-pitched whine, could be considered a kind of auditory trigger for the amygdala. It's a sound that has for generations been associated with disease suffering and death. The itchy bite is a physical reminder of this threat, a tiny scar that serves as a kind of biological memory. When we remove the mosquito, we are not just removing a creature. We are in a way removing a long and ancient source of fear. The world for us becomes a less threatening place, a place where a part of our brain can finally relax. But what happens to a mind that has been so finely tuned to a specific threat when that threat is suddenly gone? Does it simply relax and enjoy the peace? Or does it, in its infinite capacity for anxiety, begin to look for new threats? This is a question that lies at the heart of our very human nature. We are a species that is constantly on the lookout for danger, a kind of biological sentinel. The mosquito was a tangible, omnipresent danger. Without it, our minds might begin to invent new dangers, to create new fears to fill the void. The anxiety doesn't simply disappear. It reroutes, it finds new channels. This brings me to a fascinating concept in psychology, one that is perfectly suited to our thought experiment, learned helplessness. It's the idea that when we are repeatedly subjected to a negative stimulus that we cannot escape, we eventually stop trying to escape even when the opportunity arises. The mosquito, in a way, was a kind of learned helplessness. For millennia, we have been subjected to its bites and its diseases, and we have, for the most part, been powerless to stop it. We have adapted to it. We have lived with it. We have accepted it as a part of the human condition. When we suddenly remove it, we are in a way curing ourselves of this helplessness. But what does a species that has been cured of a long-standing fear do with its newfound freedom? Does it lead to a new kind of hubris? A new kind of belief that we can control all of nature? That we can solve all of our problems with a simple act of eradication? There is a strange and beautiful truth about our relationship with fear. It can be a powerful motivator. The fear of disease, for example, has driven us to create some of our greatest medical and scientific breakthroughs. It has led to the discovery of antibiotics, the development of vaccines, and a deeper understanding of our own biology. The mosquito, in its role as a carrier of disease, has been a kind of inadvertent teacher. It has forced us to be more ingenious, to be more resilient, to be more creative. When we remove the teacher, what happens to the student? Do we continue to learn, or do we become complacent, lazy, and arrogant? This raises a deep philosophical question about the nature of humanity. Are we at our best when we are challenged? When we are faced with a threat that forces us to adapt and to grow? Or are we at our best when we are at peace, when we are free from all danger and all fear? The truth is, we don't really know. We are a species that is constantly in flux, constantly changing, constantly adapting. The mosquito was a part of that process. Its absence is a kind of evolutionary shock, a kind of sudden jolt to our system. The reverberations of that jolt are only just beginning to be felt. Remember how we talked about quantum entanglement, where two particles can be connected in such a way that the state of one instantly affects the state of the other. The mosquito and the human are, in a way, a kind of biological entanglement. Our histories are linked. Our fates are intertwined. We have evolved in response to each other in a long, slow dance of adaptation and survival. When we break that entanglement, when we sever that link, we are changing not just the mosquito, but ourselves. We are becoming a new species, a kind of post-mosquito human, a creature that no longer has to fear the tiny buzzing assassin of the night. The silent world is a world of possibility, but it is also a world of profound uncertainty. The hum is gone, but the genetic memory of fear, that deep subconscious unease, still lingers. It is a ghost in the machine of our own minds, a phantom feeling that will take generations to fade. The new world is a world of peace, but it is also a world of amnesia, a world where we are in danger of forgetting the lessons that were so hard won. The silence has become a kind of canvas, and we are now beginning to see the first strokes of a new picture. The disappearance of the mosquito is not an isolated event. It is a profound change that is rippling through the world, a kind of butterfly effect on a global scale. We've all heard the phrase, the idea that the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil could set off a tornado in Texas. It's a beautiful and poetic way of describing the chaos theory. The idea that small changes in one part of a system can lead to massive, unpredictable changes in another. The mosquito is not a butterfly, but its disappearance is a far more profound change than the flutter of any wing. Think of the butterfly effect, not just in terms of weather, but in terms of ecosystems. The mosquito, as we've discussed, is a crucial part of many food webs. Its disappearance is a small change at the bottom of the food chain, a change that could have massive, unpredictable consequences at the top. The decline of a fish population in a wetland, for example, could lead to a decline in the bird population that feeds on those fish. The decline of the birds could lead to an increase in the number of insects that the birds once preyed on, and so on. The cascade of effects is a kind of biological tornado, a storm of unintended consequences that is sweeping across the world, and we are just beginning to feel its winds. This leads me to a strange and beautiful concept in physics, the idea of sensitive dependence on initial conditions. It's a core principle of chaos theory. The idea is that in a chaotic system, a small change in the initial state of the system can lead to a completely different outcome in the future. The world, in a way, is a chaotic system. It is a vast, complex, and interconnected web of life, and the mosquito was a crucial part of its initial conditions. When we remove it, we are fundamentally altering the starting point of the system. The future that unfolds from this new starting point will be a world that we cannot possibly predict. The truth is, we don't really know what the future of this silent world will look like. We can speculate. We can use our knowledge of ecology and biology to make educated guesses. But the number of variables, the number of interconnected relationships, is so vast that it is impossible to predict all the consequences. This is a humbling truth. It's a reminder that our knowledge of the world is so small, so limited. We tend to think of ourselves as the masters of the universe, the great problem solvers. But the world is a far more complex and subtle place than we give it credit for. This raises a deep philosophical question about the nature of our power. We have the power to destroy. We have the power to eradicate an entire species. But do we have the wisdom to understand the consequences of that power? The truth is, we don't. We are like children with a massive, powerful machine, a machine that we don't fully understand. We have turned one of the levers, and we are now watching with bated breath to see what happens. The outcome could be a new, beautiful, and more peaceful world. Or it could be a new and deeply chaotic one. Remember how we talked about the brain as a kind of theater of consciousness. The world, in a way, is a kind of brain, a vast, interconnected network of life. The mosquito was a kind of neuron, a tiny buzzing cell that was a part of the grand network. When we removed it, we performed a kind of massive unplanned surgery on the planet's brain. The consequences are now rippling through the system, a cascade of unpredictable changes that we are only just beginning to see. The silent world is a world of unintended consequences, a world where our desire for order has led to a new kind of chaos. The hum is gone, but the reverberations of its absence are only just beginning to be felt. We are living in a world that is fundamentally different from the one we knew, a world that is still trying to find its footing, to find its new rhythm, to find its new song. And in that silence, we are just beginning to hear the faint new notes of a world that is slowly, imperceptibly learning to adapt to change, to become something else entirely. The canvas is still wet, and the final picture is far from complete. The silence now has a new dimension, a new weight. It is not just the absence of a hum, but the absence of potential. We have, in our imagined act of global eradication, not just removed a species from the present, but we have also erased its future. We have ended a story that has been unfolding for millions of years, and with it, we may have also destroyed a library of untold knowledge, a vast and complex genetic repository that we never even knew we had. I am talking about the potential for scientific and medical discovery. We have always seen the mosquito as a carrier of disease, and we have, for the most part, been focused on how to destroy it. But what if the mosquito, in its long and ancient history, has also been a source of solutions? What if its own biology, its own unique genetic makeup, held the key to new medicines, new technologies, new ways of understanding the world? The truth is, we don't know because we have never had the chance to fully explore it. This brings me to a fascinating concept in biology, the idea of bioprospecting. It's the process of searching for new and useful compounds from living organisms. We have, for example, found life-saving drugs in the venom of snakes, in the saliva of leeches, and in the bark of trees. The natural world is a vast pharmacy, a treasure trove of potential medicines that we are only just beginning to explore. The mosquito, in its role as a carrier of disease, has evolved a complex and fascinating biology. It has a unique immune system that allows it to carry a virus without being killed by it. It has a complex relationship with the bacteria in its gut. It has a unique genetic makeup that allows it to survive in a variety of environments. The knowledge contained within its tiny body is a vast and untapped resource. The truth is, we don't really know what we have lost. We have, in our desire for a quick fix, a simple solution, burned a library before we had a chance to read all the books. We have erased a story before we had a chance to understand all the chapters. We may have destroyed a compound that could have led to a cure for a disease that has nothing to do with mosquitoes. We may have erased a genetic code that could have helped us understand our own biology in a new and profound way. The loss is not just the absence of a species. It is the loss of a future of discovery, a future of understanding. This raises a deep philosophical question about our place in the world. We are so focused on the problems of the present, the immediate threats and annoyances, that we often fail to see the potential of the future. The mosquito was a problem, yes, but it was also a part of the solution. It was a part of a larger, more complex puzzle that we were only just beginning to piece together. When we removed it, we threw away a crucial piece of that puzzle. The picture is now incomplete, and we will never be able to finish it. Remember how we talked about the brain as a kind of ecosystem, a vast and interconnected network of neurons. The world, in a way, is a kind of brain, a vast interconnected network of life. Every species is a neuron, a tiny buzzing cell that is a part of the grand network. The mosquitoes was a part of that network, a part of the planet's vast and complex consciousness. When we removed it, we performed a kind of massive, unplanned lobotomy on the planet's brain. The consequences are now rippling through the system, a cascade of unpredictable changes that we are only just beginning to see. The silent world is a world of unintended consequences, a world where our desire for order has led to a new kind of chaos. The hum is gone, but the reverberations of its absence are only just beginning to be felt. We are living in a world that is fundamentally different from the one we knew, a world that is still trying to find its footing, to find its new rhythm, to find its new song. And in that silence, we are just beginning to hear the faint new notes of a world that is slowly, imperceptibly, learning to adapt, to change, to become something else entirely. The canvas is still wet, and the final picture is far from complete. The silence we now inhabit has seeped into the very foundations of our culture, a subtle but profound shift in the way we think, feel, and organize our lives. The collective memory of the mosquito, that shared experience of annoyance and fear, is now a ghost. We are a species that has been defined in part by our relationship with this tiny insect. It has influenced our art, our literature, our folklore, and our science. Its disappearance is not just an ecological event. It is a cultural and psychological one. Think of the countless stories, poems, and songs that have been written about the mosquito. From the ancient myths of a world teeming with buzzing life to the modern-day horror stories of a world ravaged by disease, the mosquito has been a constant presence in our collective imagination. It was a kind of anti-muse, a source of inspiration for a different kind of art, a kind of art that was born out of fear and frustration. The absence of the mosquito is a kind of creative vacuum, a space that our artists and writers will now have to fill with new ideas, new metaphors, and new stories. This brings me to a fascinating concept in sociology, the idea of collective consciousness. It's the shared beliefs, ideas, and moral attitudes that operate as a unifying force within society. The mosquito, in its role as a global threat, was a kind of unifying force. It was a common enemy, a shared experience that connected people across cultures and continents. The fight against malaria, for example, has been a global effort, a testament to our ability to come together to solve a common problem. When we remove the common enemy, what happens to the collective consciousness? Do we find a new enemy, or do we, in our newfound peace, begin to turn on each other to find new reasons to be afraid, to be angry? The truth is, we don't know. The silence is a kind of social experiment, a test of our ability to live in a world that is no longer defined by a shared sense of threat. The loss of the mosquito is also a kind of loss of history. We have built our cities, our homes, and our technologies in response to the mosquito. The screens on our windows, the nets over our beds, the bug sprays we use in the summer. All of these things are a part of our shared cultural memory. They are a kind of physical record of our long and ancient war with the mosquito. When we no longer need these things, do we forget the history behind them? Do we forget the fear, the suffering, the struggle that led to their creation? The silence is a kind of amnesia, a forgetting of a part of our past that we may have needed to remember. This raises a deep philosophical question about the nature of our progress. We have always seen progress as a kind of linear march toward a better, more comfortable, and safer world. The eradication of the mosquito is, in this view, a kind of ultimate progress, a final victory over a persistent and ancient enemy. But what if progress is not linear? What if it is a kind of cycle, a kind of dance between order and chaos, between creation and destruction? The mosquito, in its role as a carrier of disease, was a kind of chaotic force, a kind of reminder that we are not in control, that there are forces in the world that are far more powerful than we are. When we remove that force, we are in a way creating an illusion of order, a false sense of security that could lead to a new kind of chaos, a chaos that is born not out of a force of nature, but out of our own hubris. Remember how we talked about the brain as a kind of ecosystem, a vast and interconnected network of neurons. The world, in a way, is a kind of brain, a vast interconnected network of life. The mosquito was a kind of neuron, a tiny buzzing cell that was a part of the grand network. When we removed it, we performed a kind of massive unplanned lobotomy on the planet's brain. The consequences are now rippling through the system, a cascade of unpredictable changes that we are only just beginning to see. The silent world is a world of unintended consequences, a world where our desire for order has led to a new kind of chaos. The hum is gone, but the reverberations of its absence are only just beginning to be felt. We are living in a world that is fundamentally different from the one we knew, a world that is still trying to find its footing, to find its new rhythm, to find its new song. And in that silence, we are just beginning to hear the faint new notes of a world that is slowly, imperceptibly learning to adapt, to change, to become something else entirely. The canvas is still wet, and the final picture is far from complete. Our silent world is now a stage for a new kind of drama, a new kind of mythology. The old stories, the tales of a world plagued by tiny buzzing demons, have slowly begun to fade. We no longer tell our children to be afraid of the sound of a mosquito because that sound is gone. We no longer speak of the great plagues that once swept through continents because those plagues are now a part of a distant, almost unimaginable past. The collective experience of a world shaped by a tiny insect has been replaced by a new reality, a new set of stories, a new mythology of the night. Think of the old myths, the ones that told of gods and monsters who lived in the swamps and the jungles. Many of these myths were a way for our ancestors to make sense of the dangers that surrounded them, the unseen threats that lurked in the darkness. The mosquito, in its role as a carrier of disease, was a kind of monster, a tiny demon that could bring sickness and death. The stories we told about it were a way of giving a face to an invisible enemy, a way of making a chaotic and terrifying reality feel more manageable. Without the monster, what happens to the stories? Do we invent new monsters, new demons to fill the void? Or do we, in our newfound safety, begin to lose our capacity for fear, our capacity for wonder, our capacity for a certain kind of dark and beautiful art? This brings me to a fascinating concept in anthropology, the idea of cultural evolution. It's the process by which cultures change and adapt over time. The mosquito, in its role as a persistent and ancient enemy, was a kind of pressure on our cultural evolution. It forced us to be more ingenious, to be more creative, to be more resilient. It shaped our art, our literature, our science, and our medicine. Its disappearance is not just a biological event. It is a cultural and psychological one. The New World is a kind of cultural blank slate, a new chapter that we are now beginning to write. The truth is, we don't really know what the new stories of the night will be. We can speculate. We can imagine a world of perfect peace, a world where the only sounds are the gentle rustle of the leaves and the soft chirps of the crickets. But a world without danger is also a world without courage. A world without a common enemy is also a world without a shared purpose. The mosquito was a kind of strange, cruel gift. It was a reminder that we are all in this together, that we are all a part of a larger, more complex story. When we removed it, we removed a part of our own story, a part of our own shared humanity. This raises a deep philosophical question about the nature of our progress. We have always seen progress as a kind of linear march toward a better, more comfortable, and safer world. The eradication of the mosquito is, in this view, a kind of ultimate progress, a final victory over a persistent and ancient enemy. But what if progress is not linear? What if it is a kind of cycle, a kind of dance between order and chaos, between creation and destruction? The mosquito, in its role as a carrier of disease, was a kind of chaotic force, a kind of reminder that we are not in control, that there are forces in the world that are far more powerful than we are. When we remove that force, we are in a way creating an illusion of order, a false sense of security that could lead to a new kind of chaos, a chaos that is born not out of a force of nature, but out of our own hubris. Remember how we talked about the brain as a kind of ecosystem, a vast and interconnected network of neurons. The world, in a way, is a kind of brain, a vast interconnected network of life. The mosquito was a kind of neuron, a tiny buzzing cell that was a part of the grand network. When we removed it, we performed a kind of massive, unplanned lobotomy on the planet's brain. The consequences are now rippling through the system, a cascade of unpredictable changes that we are only just beginning to see. The silent world is a world of unintended consequences, a world where our desire for order has led to a new kind of chaos. The hum is gone, but the reverberations of its absence are only just beginning to be felt. We are living in a world that is fundamentally different from the one we knew, a world that is still trying to find its footing, to find its new rhythm, to find its new song. And in that silence, we are just beginning to hear the faint new notes of a world that is slowly, imperceptibly learning to adapt to change, to become something else entirely. The canvas is still wet, and the final picture is far from complete. The silence, once a symbol of peace, has now become a testament to our power, a monument to a kind of human hubris. We stand in this new world, a world of our own making, and we are forced to confront the philosophical implications of our actions. We have, in a single decisive act, played God. We have eradicated an entire species, not for a simple matter of survival, but for a matter of convenience and comfort. The mosquito was a problem, yes, but it was a problem that had been a part of the world for millions of years. And our decision to remove it, to simply erase it from the grand tapestry of life, is an act that raises a deep and profound question about our place in the universe. This brings me to a core concept in philosophy, the idea of the Anthropocene epoch. It's the proposed geological epoch that marks the time when human activities began to have a significant global impact on the Earth's geology and ecosystems. We have for a long time been a force of change on this planet. We have built cities, we have deforested land, we have altered the very chemistry of the atmosphere. But the eradication of the mosquito is a new kind of act, a new kind of power. It is not just a change in the environment, it is a change in the fundamental rules of life itself. We are no longer just a part of the system. We are the system. We are the new architects of life on Earth, the new engineers of the planet. But with this new power comes a new kind of responsibility. We have a moral and ethical obligation to consider the consequences of our actions. Do we have the wisdom to wield this power? Do we have the foresight to see all the consequences? The truth is, we don't. We are like a child with a loaded gun, a weapon that could destroy a beautiful and ancient relationship that we never even knew existed. The silent world is a world of possibility, but it is also a world of profound risk. The hum is gone, but the reverberations of its absence are only just beginning to be felt. We are living in a world that is fundamentally different from the one we knew, a world that is still trying to find its footing, to find its new rhythm, to find its new song. And in that silence, we are just beginning to hear the faint new notes of a world that is slowly, imperceptibly, learning to adapt, to change, to become something else entirely. The canvas is still wet, and the final picture is far from complete. This raises a deep philosophical question about the nature of our progress. We have always seen progress as a kind of linear march toward a better, more comfortable, and safer world. The eradication of the mosquito is, in this view, a kind of ultimate progress, a final victory over a persistent and ancient enemy. But what if progress is not linear? What if it is a kind of cycle, a kind of dance between order and chaos, between creation and destruction? The mosquito, in its role as a carrier of disease, was a kind of chaotic force, a kind of reminder that we are not in control, that there are forces in the world that are far more powerful than we are. When we remove that force, we are in a way creating an illusion of order, a false sense of security that could lead to a new kind of chaos, a chaos that is born not out of a force of nature, but out of our own hubris. Remember how we talked about the brain as a kind of ecosystem, a vast and interconnected network of neurons. The world, in a way, is a kind of brain, a vast interconnected network of life. The mosquito was a kind of neuron, a tiny buzzing cell that was a part of the grand network. When we removed it, we performed a kind of massive unplanned lobotomy on the planet's brain. The consequences are now rippling through the system, a cascade of unpredictable changes that we are only just beginning to see. The silent world is a world of unintended consequences, a world where our desire for order has led to a new kind of chaos. The hum is gone, but the reverberations of its absence are only just beginning to be felt. We are living in a world that is fundamentally different from the one we knew, a world that is still trying to find its footing, to find its new rhythm, to find its new song. And in that silence, we are just beginning to hear the faint new notes of a world that is slowly, imperceptibly learning to adapt, to change, to become something else entirely. The canvas is still wet, and the final picture is far from complete. We are now in the final act of our thought experiment, in a world that has been made new by an act of our own will. The silence is no longer a canvas. It is a mirror, a reflection of ourselves and our place in the world. The old mythology, the stories of a world plagued by tiny demons, has been replaced by a new mythology, a new set of stories about a world we have tamed. The heroes of these new stories are not the great warriors of old, but the scientists and engineers who, with a single act of ingenuity, brought an end to an ancient enemy. The villains are no longer the buzzing creatures of the night, but the forces of nature that once held us in check. This brings me to a fascinating and deeply human concept, the idea of myth-making. We as human beings are storytellers. We use stories to make sense of the world, to give meaning to our lives, to understand our place in the grand scheme of things. The mosquito was a powerful part of our old mythology. It was a symbol of chaos, a symbol of our own vulnerability, a symbol of the untamed, unpredictable forces of nature. Its disappearance is a kind of narrative vacuum, a space that we are now rushing to fill with new stories, new symbols, new meanings. The new mythology is a mythology of control. It is a story about a species that has finally transcended its place in the natural world, a species that has finally become the master of its own destiny. The hero of this new story is not the one who learns to live with the forces of nature, but the one who learns to control them, to tame them, to bend them to their will. This is a powerful and seductive story, a story that speaks to our deepest desires for order, for safety, for comfort. But it is also a dangerous story, a story that could lead to a new kind of hubris, a new kind of blindness to the true complexity and subtlety of the world. The truth is, we don't really know what the long-term consequences of this new mythology will be. Will it lead to a new era of peace and prosperity, a world where we are finally free from the dangers that once plagued us? Or will it lead to a new kind of complacency, a new kind of arrogance, a new kind of belief that we are above the rules of nature? The silent world is a world of possibility, but it is also a world of profound uncertainty. The hum is gone, but the reverberations of its absence are only just beginning to be felt. We are living in a world that is fundamentally different from the one we knew, a world that is still trying to find its footing, to find its new rhythm, to find its new song. And in that silence, we are just beginning to hear the faint new notes of a world that is slowly, imperceptibly, learning to adapt, to change, to become something else entirely. The canvas is still wet, and the final picture is far from complete. This raises a deep philosophical question about the nature of our progress. We have always seen progress as a kind of linear march toward a better, more comfortable, and safer world. The eradication of the mosquito is, in this view, a kind of ultimate progress, a final victory over a persistent and ancient enemy. But what if progress is not linear? What if it is a kind of cycle, a kind of dance between order and chaos, between creation and destruction? The mosquito, in its role as a carrier of disease, was a kind of chaotic force, a kind of reminder that we are not in control, that there are forces in the world that are far more powerful than we are. When we remove that force, we are in a way creating an illusion of order, a false sense of security that could lead to a new kind of chaos, a chaos that is born not out of a force of nature, but out of our own hubris. Remember how we talked about the brain as a kind of ecosystem, a vast and interconnected network of neurons. The world, in a way, is a kind of brain, a vast interconnected network of life. The mosquito was a kind of neuron, a tiny buzzing cell that was a part of the grand network. When we removed it, we performed a kind of massive unplanned lobotomy on the planet's brain. The consequences are now rippling through the system, a cascade of unpredictable changes that we are only just beginning to see. The silent world is a world of unintended consequences, a world where our desire for order has led to a new kind of chaos. The hum is gone, but the reverberations of its absence are only just beginning to be felt. We are living in a world that is fundamentally different from the one we knew, a world that is still trying to find its footing, to find its new rhythm, to find its new song. And in that silence, we are just beginning to hear the faint new notes of a world that is slowly, imperceptibly, learning to adapt, to change, to become something else entirely. The canvas is still wet, and the final picture is far from complete. We have journeyed through this silent world, a world of our own making, and we have seen the ripples of our actions spread out across the great tapestry of life. The hum is gone, the final echo of a vanished presence. The silence that remains is not a sign of a perfect world, but a sign of a world that is fundamentally different, a world that is both richer and poorer for our actions. We have, in a single act of hubris and ingenuity, created a new kind of reality, and now we are left to live in it. The final paradox of our victory is this: in our quest for a world without a problem, we have created a world with a new kind of mystery. The mosquito, in its role as a carrier of disease, was a part of our shared story. It was a kind of anti-hero, a dark and dangerous figure that forced us to be more ingenious, to be more resilient, to be more creative. Its disappearance is not a simple victory. It is a profound loss, a kind of biological sacrifice that we are only just beginning to understand. The new world is a world of peace, but it is also a world of amnesia, a world where we are in danger of forgetting the lessons that were so hard won. The silence is a kind of echo, a reminder of a presence that is now gone. And in that silence, we are just beginning to hear the faint new notes of a world that is slowly, imperceptibly, learning to adapt, to change, to become something else entirely. The canvas is still wet, and the final picture is far from complete. This raises a deep philosophical question about the nature of our progress. We have always seen progress as a kind of linear march toward a better, more comfortable, and safer world. The eradication of the mosquito is, in this view, a kind of ultimate progress, a final victory over a persistent and ancient enemy. But what if progress is not linear? What if it is a kind of cycle, a kind of dance between order and chaos, between creation and destruction? The mosquito, in its role as a carrier of disease, was a kind of chaotic force, a kind of reminder that we are not in control, that there are forces in the world that are far more powerful than we are. When we remove that force, we are in a way creating an illusion of order, a false sense of security that could lead to a new kind of chaos, a chaos that is born not out of a force of nature, but out of our own hubris. Remember how we talked about the brain as a kind of ecosystem, a vast and interconnected network of neurons. The world, in a way, is a kind of brain, a vast interconnected network of life. The mosquito was a kind of neuron, a tiny buzzing cell that was a part of the grand network. When we removed it, we performed a kind of massive unplanned lobotomy on the planet's brain. The consequences are now rippling through the system, a cascade of unpredictable changes that we are only just beginning to see. The silent world is a world of unintended consequences, a world where our desire for order has led to a new kind of chaos. The hum is gone, but the reverberations of its absence are only just beginning to be felt. We are living in a world that is fundamentally different from the one we knew, a world that is still trying to find its footing, to find its new rhythm, to find its new song. And in that silence, we are just beginning to hear the faint new notes of a world that is slowly, imperceptibly learning to adapt to change, to become something else entirely. The canvas is still wet, and the final picture is far from complete. Our journey together is nearing its end. We have traveled to the ends of the earth and into the deepest corners of our own minds, all in an effort to understand the consequences of a single, powerful action. We began with a sound, a simple hum, and we ended with a silence that is now full of 1,000 new stories. The world we imagined is not a utopia, and it is not a dystopia. It is simply a different world, a world of unexpected beauty and profound loss. It is a world that is a testament to our power, but also a monument to our ignorance. The silence is a kind of echo, a gentle whisper of a world that is now gone. It is a reminder that we are all a part of a larger, more complex story, a story that is still being written. I'd like to gently ask one last time, where is the place you're staying now? The time in that place at this very moment, how is it flowing? Just for a moment, let's just listen together to the quiet that surrounds you and the quiet that lives inside of you. Let the sounds of your world, whatever they may be, wash over you. There is a story in every sound, in every silence, and in that story, there is a kind of peace, a kind of comfort that is waiting for you. Find that peace now, find that comfort, and let it carry you. Sleep well, my companion, wherever and whenever you are. Sweet dreams.